Okay, continuing our tutorial on War for America, part 5, I guess, and we're in the late summer of 1776. Now I'm going to make one comment about the cards. I think I've mentioned it once before. In this particular game, the cards are not coming up as often as I would like, which is a little odd because in playtesting we had no trouble with cards, but they're not coming up very often. Now I've done a little bit of the math. I think I've done 32 die rolls so far, and we only had one tie, which is a little unusual. So maybe official, unofficial. You can always make your own little house rule for cards. Perhaps I should have made the cards once every turn, not every pulse, but once every turn. So if you want to do that variant, you're certainly welcome to do so. That'll get the cards in circulation. Another way is to take the discard cards and not fold them into the new deck every time a year comes by. That's another variant. Or you can make your own, where you maybe twice a year draw for cards. I'll continue with the original stock again, because who knows, in the next 20 minutes as I do moves, we might get a whole mess of ties and the cards will circulate. So these are the kind of things that don't come up necessarily in playtesting, especially with a 20-hour game. So let's roll for initiative and see who's moving first for the late summer of 1776. Now to tie, the Colonials will be going first, so they're going to take the first action pulse. Late summer 1776. I forgot something there, because the Colonials don't have any reinforcements for the late summer of 1776. The British do. So we'll be removing Graves' fleet, removing Parker's squadron, and we're going to add 6 British and 3 Germans in the Europe box. But that, of course, will occur only in the British phase. Now, another rule that new players will often forget, and even I forget sometimes, is the leader transfers. That occurs in the reinforcement phase, which is right now. So at any point on the board, if you've got leaders that are overstacked or you don't want them there, you're free to move them now. And I think in the case of the Army in Canada with Carleton, he's got Fraser, Burgoyne, and Riedesel with him. Howe's got Clinton and Kniphausen. I think I'm going to take Clinton, take him off the board. He's actually here at Newport, and just transfer him to England. Why would I do that? Well, that's because when the reinforcements do come in, these new reinforcements, they'll have leadership. So that's why Clinton is in the leader box. Now, Americans have the same ability. They can transfer leaders. Now, Washington's army's got all kinds of extra leaders, so they can do a free transfer. So you might as well transfer leaders that are not doing anything to theaters where they can matter. So Washington's got Greene, Ward, and Lincoln. He'll keep Greene with him because he adds 3 to the dice. I think he'll move Benjamin Lincoln out of his army. Lincoln is in here. And let's move him down to Baltimore here, or at least he can activate some troops. Now Gates has got 1 extra leader, which is kind of unnecessary. It's Putnam. Well, might as well take Putnam out then and place him at Albany. Always good idea to spread your leaders out so that they have leadership. So let's look at the Colonials and what they can do this turn. First of all, that build marker at Fort Edward is now finished. So Gates' army is in a fort at Fort Edward. Okay, I think we'll activate Lincoln and bring him up north. His initiative value is 5. He rolls, and that's on the floor. Let's roll again. Got a 6. So he did not get his initiative, which means Lincoln can move 2. So we'll go 1, 2 to Philadelphia here. And that's the Colonial turn. Okay, the British move now, and they've got to do something. They've got to get their campaign rolling, because 1776 is coming to a close soon, and they just haven't made enough leeway. So I think I might have to open up a campaign in the south. So those reinforcements coming from England 6 British and 3 Germans are going to sail all the way to Georgetown in South Carolina. That, of course, is by die roll, and that does not consume the transport capability. By the way, I had that at 6. It's actually 10 for 1776. Doesn't matter right now because they haven't been used. Reinforcements now, or destination, is going to be Georgetown. Let's see how far they get. Rolling. Well, they get the absolute worst number. They get 1. So their destination is Georgetown. We pick them up, and they sweep down here into the Atlantic Ocean area number 1. They don't get too far. The winds are contrary. That ends that pulse. We're going to roll now for the first action pulse. Second action pulse, actually. Here we go. And the Colonials win it. Colonials go first. Okay, so since this is a game, not a historical simulation, the Colonials know that a force is now headed for Georgetown. Something, of course, that they would not know. So, they better start reacting to that. There's only so much you can simulate in a game. Let's take a look at the South and see what they've got. Well, if the Colonials start reacting in advance to the attack on Georgetown, that means the North is going to stay quiet. So I'm not sure what they should do. The North is really an active theater. A lot depends on what Howe is going to do. I think, well, it's a small move, but I think I'll do it. This Continental here will join the force under Charles Lee. Now, he has no leader, so he rolls the dice, and it's -2. He rolls 2, which is the worst he could have got. You always get 1 movement point. So he'll move just here to PD. Not much of a move. Now we're back up to the British turn. What do they do? Well, we can remove this D marker for 1. Rule of thumb, always move your reinforcements first, and the destination is Georgetown. You can't change that once you're at sea, so roll the die to see how many movement points that column gets. And they get 3. I think they just make it. No, they don't. So they go 1, 2, and 3 down to the deep south blockade zone. So they're still at sea. It's taking a while for Clinton to get there, which is pretty historical. Sailing times to North America could take 4 to 8 weeks. That doesn't consume an action pulse. Okay, we've got to get Howe doing something, or Carleton's army doing something. Let's see what they can do. Okay, I may regret this, but Howe's going to make a bid to overrun Massachusetts or New Hampshire. No, probably Massachusetts. Or maybe Connecticut. Scare Washington a bit. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move Howe. He's going to move to Boston, Worcester, Springfield, then Hartford. Maybe that'll get Washington to react, and he'll leave garrisons along the way. So, Howe is on the move. Let's roll for his initiative. He does not get his initiative. Well, there goes that idea. But he does get 2 movement points, and he must follow through with his plan. So he'll go up to Boston, and then to Worcester. Okay, Howe moves inland, up to Boston. I think, yeah, he's going to need to control that, which can be a tempting target for Washington later. So he's going to leave 4 British there at Boston, and then move on to Worcester. So Howe leaves a force of 4 factors 2 Germans and 2 British at Boston and moves immediately on Worcester. Now he's got 16 factors. That's not enough to do an 8-1, so it's not an overrun. Now, the Colonials, they don't fancy fighting at 16, so they're going to try to retreat before combat, and they have to roll from that. They have no leaders, so they'll only retreat on a 1 or 2. They do not. So we're going to have a battle at Worcester. 16 versus 6. Let's work out that battle. Okay, so that battle won't be too favorable to the Colonials. Howe has 16 factors, so he's on the 15 to 20 table, the largest, and he's adding 5 to the dice. So victory should be assured there. The Colonials are on the 3 to 7 table with no modifiers. So we'll roll the dice, see what we get. Okay, rolling for the battle at Worcester. Okay, the British get 7 and the Colonials get 7. Now, Howe is adding 5 to the dice. So he's rolled a 12, which is 3 strength points, the best he could have got. And the Colonials rolled 7, which means they ding the British for 1. So Howe has clearly won the battle at Worcester. Let's take the losses off. Okay, so for the Colonials, the first loss must be irregular, which is 1. The second one must be a militia, which is 2. And again, he wants to preserve his continental, so he'll take another hit on the militia, leaving him 2. Now that unnamed force has to retreat from Worcester. They could join up with this militia or retreat to the magazine. They'll retreat to the magazine, I guess. And they're rewarded with a D marker. Now that's the end of Howe's movement. Now Howe has to take a regular off, so we'll take one off of his army. Alright, so that's the British move. We're rolling for the next initiative. This is a case where if the British get back-to-back turns, it could make a difference, because that militia force has a D on it. Let's roll. And the British do go first. So if they hit that same space again and win, the Colonials take an extra loss. So that might well worth it. And they are trying to go for control of Massachusetts. Now they are going to be scattered. That's going to give an opportunity for Washington in his turn. But let's see what Howe can do. Okay, Howe is going to continue his rampage through Massachusetts. Like I said, I may be sorry for this. Okay, his stated move will be Northfield, Northampton, Springfield. He rolls the die for his initiative. He rolls a 5, which is over, so he does not get the entire stated move. And I have to move the way I stated it, which is Northfield, then Northampton. So the question is, do I leave a garrison at Worcester? Trouble is with leaving garrisons and stuff, you leaving your rear open to Mr. Washington there. Okay, he will leave a small garrison there, and I mean small, at Worcester, and move on Northfield. Now he has 15 to 2, which isn't quite 8 to 1, so it is not an overrun. Now the militia, of course, will try to get the heck out of there. They'll roll a die and see if they move. They do retreat, so they will retreat to Northampton. The British can leave a garrison again, which they do. And Howe had 2 movement points, so he continues on to Northampton. The militia, of course, will try to retreat. No use staying there and getting destroyed. They roll a 3, so they do not retreat. So we have another battle there. Howe should have no trouble winning that one. Howe once more is on the largest table, now adding 6 to the dice because he's fighting exclusively militia. And the militia is on the little petite guerre table, actually minusing 1 because they're attacking regulars. So let's see what Howe does here. Howe gets a 5, adding 5 to the dice. It's a 10, which is 1 hit and 3 stars. But yeah, 1 hit and 3 stars. And the Colonials roll a 7, and there are 2. They just get 3 stars. So the militia is flipped to the other side and retreats to Springfield along with those D units. And that's the British turn. Now something has happened, and let's see how this plays out in game terms. Okay, what has happened? Well, for the second time in the game, the colony has come under control. Remember, the first one was Rhode Island. Now Massachusetts is totally under British control. Therefore, the political will is adjusted. Political will goes down by 1 for the Colonials and up 1 for the British. Now, that control is tenuous, of course, because now the Colonials are going to move, and Mr. Washington might have something to say about that condition. Okay, these D markers will come off. And the most logical move is for Washington to move. Let's look at his options. Option number 1. Washington does have a lot of options. He actually could go into Newport and attack it. I've done the math, and it's not too encouraging. Both sides would be on the largest table, the 15 to 20. The British would be adding 5 to the dice, because they've got good leadership, and they've got the fleet there too, which will add another 1. Washington himself is a respectable force. He'll be adding 5. But that's pretty iffy, and when it's 50-50 and an even battle, the attacker loses. So I don't think that would be the best option for Washington. But he does have some opportunities here, almost like at Trenton, Princeton. Boston is open. There's only 4 strength points there. The most logical thing for Washington to do would be slam into Boston, maybe go into Worcester, or come up from Springfield and hit Howe again. Howe would be 11-15. He'd be on the 15 table, adding 4. And Washington can at least equal that. So the question is, does he attack the main army or clip off these small British forces? Personally, I think it's better to clip off the small British forces, hit, and get the heck out. So that's what Washington is going to do. Now, Washington does not have enough forces to do an overrun on Boston, but I think he should certainly hit the Boston garrison. Now, Washington always has to be careful about his rear also. But I think that's the best move. Washington will move on Boston. He rolls initiative. Washington's pretty reliable in that sense. In that sense, he is a good commander. Not great tactically. He rolls a 5, which means Washington does move immediately on Boston. Okay, doing the math, Washington will easily destroy or cause great harm to that Boston garrison. So, of course, the Boston garrison will try to pull out. No leader, he'll have to roll a 1 or 2. They do not. So Washington attacks that force on the best table, 15 to 20, and he is adding 5 to the dice. So this is not going to be pretty for the British. Okay, Washington on the 15 to 20 table, adding 5 to the dice. The British on the 4 table. Wow. Washington rolls lousy, and so do the British. But he's got so many modifiers. He rolled a 3, which is really an 8. So he inflicts only 1 with a 2 star. And the British, only 4, get nothing. So, they have to lose a regular. I'll take it off the Germans this time. Boston has fallen, and these guys will retreat to Newport, and they own a D marker. Now, the British have lost control of Massachusetts. Now, another rule kicks in here. We'll have to check the size of the Massachusetts militia in there to see if that rule comes into effect. That rule comes into effect. And that's good old Rule 10.11. Now, the British had control of Massachusetts, and they've just lost control of it. And at the end of the action pulse, the colonials are allowed to re-raise the militia in Massachusetts. Now, there's already 3 Massachusetts militia on the board. So they roll the loyalist and militia muster chart here to see how many they can raise. And they get 2, which is 1/2 the loyalist the militia. Now, New England's militia is 6. They're only allowed to raise 3. So they raise 3 more, bringing it back up to 6, which is pretty ugly for the British. That's what I meant when I said the militia are a renewable resource. And when Massachusetts militia is back up to 6. And now you can see how hard it is for the British to conquer territory and hold it, as the British found out historically. Now, another rule comes into play now, because Howe is nearly cut off. Yeah, he's got a garrison at Worcester, but he can't supply back to Newport or the coast because he's cut off. So he's in a dire situation. He's got a very tenuous supply line up this way. Up to Northfield, 1 moving point, Brattleboro 2, Charlestown 3, Otter Creek 4, and Ticonderoga 5, which is a key space. So Howe is in supply through a very tenuous supply line. Very tenuous. And this D comes off. And now we're rolling for the last initiative of the turn. Again, point out that this is very critical. Because what if the colonials move first? Let's see who has the next initiative. And it's a tie. Well, lo and behold, we've got a tie. A tie means we each draw a card, and then you perform an action phase again, and the turn is over. So let's draw a card for each side. Not a great card draw. We're not getting the historical events. The colonials draw a battle card, and the British draw an extended march. Now you remember when you do draw a tie, you only have 1 action pulse left. You do not roll for the last action pulse. You take the action pulse of the last person that went. So it is the British. The British will move, the colonials will move, and that will end the turn. Now, if I was the British, I'd be moving Howe for sure, because he's got to get out of that messy situation. But before we do that, let's remember good old Clinton. He's down here in the South blockade box. What can he do? His destination, remember, is Georgetown. So he has to go to Georgetown. A roll, he'll make it, I'm pretty sure, no matter what he rolls, right? Yeah, he gets there. So Clinton lands at Georgetown. And remember, he's got 1 movement point left if he desires it. So he actually could march on Charleston and attack it. Let me look at that option. Now, Howe has a few options. None of them not very good. And I've done the math. If Howe marched on Washington, they'd both be on the same table, unless I move Howe to Boston to give support. Howe would then be adding, I think, 6 to the dice. Washington would be adding 5. It would be a chancy battle, of course. Not good. No, this entrenchment shouldn't be there. There's nobody there. What could Howe do? Well, he could be mean-spirited and attack this militia, just doing mean. Try to destroy 2 continentals at the same time. He could actually strike Gates from the rear, which might be profitable. Join up with the Canadian Army. That kind of abandons the whole New England campaign, doesn't it? He also could march down the Hudson and capture New York. So he's got lots of options. But, wow. What a decision. Now, just looking at the situation, if Howe failed his command value, he'd only go 2 squares. He'd be down somewhere at Escalation, probably out of supply then. 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, he would be. He's got an extended march card. Yeah, Howe's going to run for New York. And just to make sure, he's going to play an extended march card. You always must state that you're going to use a card before you roll the die. So Howe is going to move to Catskill, Escalation, Highlands, and New York. Let's see if he gets his initiative. He does. So the extended march card is expended anyway, because he declared it so. And Howe runs down to New York. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now Schuyler is all alone, which means he's going to be rolling on a captured prisoner box. The fort is captured. Change that to a British fort. And we'll roll on the prisoner exchange box, see what happens there. And I've got to give Schuyler a chance to retreat before combat. He may not end up as a prisoner of war at all. Let's roll. He gets his initiative. So he retreats, joins Lincoln at Trenton. And the British have captured New York City. Again, the control, or rather the political will marker does not change. New York is only a city, not a colony. So the Colonials will finish their last action pulse of the entire late summer turn. Okay, well, Washington doesn't have to worry about anything in the north. He's secure. He doesn't want to attack Newport either. So I think we'll look at this southern campaign. 1, the D marker comes off, and I think Charles Lee will consolidate his forces here. So we'll activate him and he'll gather up some troops. It's too bad the troops weren't adjacent here. He could do a muster action. But he'll roll his initiative. He does get it. So he can just go 1, 2, 3, 4, pick up this 2 and pull them in, creating a nice little wee army down here in the south. And that ends the entire turn of the late summer of 1776. We're now into the fall turn of 1776. Okay, a little recap of the situation. It's toward the end of 1776, and the British are almost in the historical position they were. They're just not winning the revolution. Yeah, they've got New York City, fine. They've got Ticonderoga, and they've got a secure hold on Newport. But they don't have a secure hold anywhere else. You can see how hard it is for the British to control and knock out colonies. They need a different strategy. And I failed in mine. I thought I might be able to isolate New England. But with Washington running around with an army of 20, that's not too easy. Now, I'd like to at least get up to past the winter of 1777 to show you what happens there. Because the Continental Army will be about half of what it was. So 1777 is coming up. That's still a decisive year. But the British may have to change their strategy. Maybe going for that coastal strategy of occupying major towns. But it is very difficult. All of the strategic options for the British are difficult, except maybe capturing and destroying Washington's army. Washington, the Fox, it's not easy to corner. Remember, the way you do it is surround a force, attack it, and win, cause it to surrender. But like I said, Washington's going to be a tricky devil to tag down. Anyway, let's look to the fall turn of 1777. Of course, I'm at the fall of 1776. Now, the Colonials don't get any reinforcements. The British have a few counters that come on that are going to make a difference. Laughable, you say, but no, they make a difference. The British put their Lake Navy on the board now at St. John's. What does that do? Well, not a heck of a lot in tactical terms for battles, but it absolutely blocks the colonial forces from coming into Canada. They can't go past St. Jean without being out of supply. So the only avenue back into Canada is down the Hudson, up the Mohawk, then up the St. Lawrence, which is going to be quite a campaign. So this Lake Navy alone secures Canada. Now the British also receive a small reinforcement of 3 British and 2 Germans at any one controlled port, unlike the other reinforcements that have to travel from Europe. These can be placed at any port that they control. They now control Charleston, so I'm going to put them there, beefing up the Southern Army. I think the British now at least have to look at a Southern campaign. So that's it for the reinforcement phase of the fall of 1776. Once again, rolling for initiative, the fall of 1776. It's a tie. Hey, maybe it is working. Okay, both sides are each going to draw a card, but that means the action phase will end after one phase, which shortens the turn record, which ultimately does not help the British. Let's draw another card for each side. So even though the Colonials have 3 cards in their hand, they still draw a card. Then they're allowed to discard one. So this will be the Colonial draw. They get another extended march. I can't understand why all these battle and movement cards is coming up. So they'll discard the extended march. They don't really need it. Now the British will draw their card. And they get, Pitt the Elder speaks against the war. The British PW marker is moved 1 to the left. Well, the trouble is that's an American event. So the British player has to offer it to the colonial player. And he can decline or keep it. Well, the British political marker 1 to the left, you never know. He'll keep it and discard the battle card. The British now draws another card. And he gets another American card. And of course, the Declaration of Independence. Well, the Americans have got to take that. So they'll get rid of this extended march card, take the Declaration of Independence. We can now call them Americans. The British draw another card. And they finally get a British event. So that's the end of the card draw. The repercussions of a tie result are enormous. That's why I was so surprised we weren't having enough of them. We drew our cards like we were supposed to. But after you draw a card, each side has 1 action pulse left, not 4. And you don't roll for initiative. The person who goes first is the person who last moved first, which was the British. In other words, the British are going to take a pulse, the Colonials are going to take a pulse, and the entire turn is over. Now that simple rule has huge implications for the British. Because instead of having 4 action pulses, now they have 1. And next thing you know, you're in the winter turn. So tie results can shorten the game too, possibly not making it a 20-hour game if you get lots of ties. So the British will move now, the Colonials will move, and that will end the entire turn of the fall of 1776. Okay, we are on the last action pulse of 1776, and the British are moving first. And I'm looking towards the south here, where I think Clinton has got a possible campaign going. Now I have to backtrack because I actually forgot something. Easy to do with this game. Like I said, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of rules interrelated with each other. And when I landed Clinton at Charleston, I forgot that we have a militia muster here. You say, well, why didn't we do that before? Well, before we only had Lord Dunmore's forces, which were loyalists. But that rule, where you trigger militia when British regulars first enter the region, that rule kicks in. So I won't change the combat results from before. I'll just retroactively roll for the militia. So we're rolling for the militia for the entire Deep South region. So we have to mark that. show that the Deep South militia has been taken, and we're going to roll for each colony in the region. Let's see what is raised. Okay, let's roll for North Carolina first. Gets a 2, which is only 1/2 of the loyalists. North Carolina can really raise 4 militia, therefore they only get 2. Okay, let's place those where they can do some good at Fort Bernard, close to where the action is. Okay, we're rolling for the South Carolina militia now. They roll a 3, which is 1/2. South Carolina can raise 4 militia, so they only get 2. Now note, I could have put them at Charleston in that battle, but I think it wouldn't have changed the result much. I think the best move was for the Americans to get out if they could. Anyway, we'll put them at, well, might as well have them stack with Charles Lee. Although we know they're supposed to come in at a center if possible. No. Okay, no, we'll have it stack with Charles Lee. Now we're rolling for the Georgia militia, which most they can never raise is 1. They roll a 1, which is 0. So the militia raising in this case really had no impact on the game. Okay, while the Colonials are weak in the South, I think the best move that Clinton could do would be to activate, move north, pick up Lord Dunmore's forces, move back down south to Charleston, then to Savannah, and move inland to Augusta and try to control Georgia. So we'll roll for Clinton's initiative, and let's see what happens. He gets a 1, so that's what he'll do. He'll move up, lead garrisons in Savannah and Augusta. Now note that Clinton is a 2-star leader, not an army leader, and he can only move 10 strength points at any one given time. So you'll have to do a little bit of juggling here, but I'll show you the move after Clinton has performed his movement up the river to Augusta. Okay, that's the move after Clinton has performed his campaign. So he's left 8, he's got 9 regulars here at Augusta, and he's left a man at Savannah. I think I'll leave 1 more at Savannah. And Dunmore here in a fort at Charlestown. So with that, Georgia is controlled. So we'll move the political will marker down 1 for the Colonials and up 1 for the British. Since the British have cards to burn, I might as well use this too. The olive branch petition. Colonial player moves his PWBP marker 1 to the left. So we'll do that. Political will marker for the Americans is now at 10. That will end the British turn. So they've got 2 colonies under control now. Rhode Island and Georgia. Now it's the Patriots' turn, and that will end the entire turn. Well, the Patriots have good historical events to do. They'll declare their independence, which moves their PW marker 2 to the right, back up to 12. And Pitt the Elder speaks against the war. The British PW marker is moved 1 to the left. So, get those out of the way, and that'll help recycle some cards. What can they do militarily? Well, doing the math, Charles Lee could strike at Charleston. Sure would be nice to get the British out of there. It's a pretty even fight though. They'd both be on the 3 to 7 table. Lee would be adding 2, Dunmore would be adding only 1. It's iffy, but it's so important for the Colonials to take back territory if possible, deny the British bases. I think it's worth the risk. So Charles Lee will attempt it. He's going to roll for his initiative. He does not get it. He's only at 2 movement points. So he can't do what he wanted to do. But he must follow through with as much of the move as he intended. And he wanted to pick up this unit and move in. So he'll go 1 and then 2. So he's at Eutaw Springs with an army. And that ends the entire turn for the fall. Now we enter the winter turn, where a lot of critical stuff happens. Now this is the first winter turn where attrition comes into play. First winter of the war, that is not a factor. Now in the winter, action pulses are only 2. As always, first thing you look at is the reinforcement chart. Now since the winter turn only consists of 2 pulses, you're going to move very carefully because you have to be looking ahead towards winter attrition. For example, winter attrition, if you have a control key space on a coast, you can winter with 20 strength points and no repercussions. If you're on a coastal space, but it's not a major city, you can have 15 strength points. If you're on a control key space that's non-coastal, let's say like Fort Stanwix, you can hold 10 strength points. And if you're on a small circle space, you can only hold 5 SPs. And if you have a magazine on the space, you can hold 4 more than normal. So you should always be looking ahead towards where your men are going to winter quarter. For example, Washington on the coast here, it's got an army of what, 13, 16, 20. He's going to be fine on the coast if he stays there. You wouldn't want to move an army of 20 onto a small circle space. That would be disastrous. You'd have greater winter attrition. So in winter, you always want to be looking ahead to where you're going to spend the winter. Gates, for example, has only 5 strength points, and he's at Fort Edwards. He's fine because that space can hold 5. In the south, you're usually okay because the forces are small. But with that, we're going to roll for initiative to see who moves first in the winter. And it's the British. British move first. Move the action pulse marker down. And let's look at the British. Now the British have to watch for winter quartering too. It's not a freebie. I'll take a look and we'll adjust the armies accordingly. Now note that you have 2 pulses to get to conform to the winter attrition, so you can move before. Now I've just done a spot check of the British and they're fine all across the board. So they don't really have to move. So I can think about entrenching or doing some minor moves to consolidate their position. I mean, I could even do an attack against Gates, but the Canada Army is really only 5, 7 strength points, not the best leadership. It would be iffy. Winter campaigns are iffy. So let's just see what the British can do. I don't think the British have to do much. After all, after winter, the Continental Army is going to be half its size. Of course, there's going to be Continental Levy interphase where they re-raise the army, but I don't think they want to do any risky moves into the interior. So I guess we'll just maybe entrench. We'll entrench, we'll build a fort. Yeah, Clinton will attempt to build a fort at Augusta. He rolls his initiative. He does get it. So he can start a fort at Augusta. We'll put a build marker on the fort. That's the British turn. Now by winter, the fleet has to be in a major port. Howe's fleet already is in one. So now the Colonial turn. What can they do? They should check their winter quartering first. Charles Lee is a little bit overstacked there, so it would make sense to fall back either to Serraro or Wilmington. He'll pick Serraro. He'll roll his initiative. He gets a 1, which is okay. So he'll fall back to Serraro, where he'll be fine for the winter. Leave an entrenchment behind. That's the Colonial turn. Advance the pulse marker down, and we roll to see who has the next initiative. It's a tie. Well, hey, the ties finally come through. With the tie, you may remember, each party draws a card, takes an action pulse, and that ends the turn. Let's draw a card for the British. And they get an American event. And the Americans draw a card, and they get a British event. Isn't that weird? Well, they each have to offer it to the other. Loyalist recruits. Yeah, the British will take that for sure. Virgin? Yeah, they'll take it. They get some Continentals. So, a weird exchange of events there. And remember, because it was a tie, we do not roll for initiative. It's the person who had the initiative last, which was the British. The British will move, the Americans will move, and that will end the winter turn. Then we're going to have to do continental attrition and all that good stuff. So, the British, what should they do? Well, I think the British should take advantage of these loyalist recruits. It says place 2 strength points of loyalists in any space containing at least 1 regular. So that's what they'll do. They'll expend that card and place 2 militia or loyalists in a space. I think we'll put them with Lord Dunmore, make his force pretty big. Oh, it's got to contain a regular. Yeah, it does. Okay, so that's done. Now the fort that was started is now finished with Clinton. That's free because forts are free once they've started construction. And using a card is free. So the British still have a move if they wish to do so. It's one of the few times the British actually have really nothing to do. But you should never waste an action pulse. So do something. Let's try an entrenchment at Savannah. No leader, -2 to the dice. Rolls a 3. He gets 1 movement point, which is not an. Wait, entrenchments cost 1 movement point. Nope, they cost 2 movement points. So that's the British turn. The Colonials move now, and I think they're all set up for winter quarters. So we'll have Charles Lee entrench down here at Serraro. He rolls his initiative. He gets it, and so the Americans place an entrenchment. Charles Lee. Now we're going on to the complex moves that take place in winter. Okay, this is the phase that the British like the best, colonial attrition. So continentals all across the board have to lose 1/2 of their strength points. Right across the board, rounded down. So I'll commence south to north, removing these continentals. Clinton has 5 continentals, so he loses 2.5, round down. He actually loses 2 continentals. Notice it's continentals, not militia. Now while you're at it, since it happens in the phase right after, check to see if you've not over-quartered. Well, Serraro can hold 10, and there's only 5 there, so Charles Lee does not suffer any bad winter quartering. Okay, Schuyler at Trenton has 2 continentals, 50%, so 1 will be left. Over at Springfield, move the camera a bit. Springfield has only 2 continentals, 50% go, so 1 goes away. Washington's main army consists of 16 continentals, so he has to be cut in half. So Washington will be left with 8 continentals only. Severe winter. Over on the coast there, we've got 2 continentals at Portsmouth. They become 1. Gates' army has 3 continentals, loses 1.5, which is really 1. So he'll be left with 2. We'll place 2 back on Gates's card. And I think that's the last force, maybe just Putnam. Putnam has 2 continentals, so he's going to lose 1. and everybody's not over-quartered. I've already checked the British, they're okay. The next step is to remove all magazines from the board, which I'll do so now. Now, Six Nations units have been on the board, which they're not. They'd be returning to their respective villages. And if we had British withdrawal in effect, that would occur now. Of course, that hasn't happened yet either. So that's what would happen at the end of 1776 and a rough winter. The next turn would be the early spring turn of 1777, where lots happens in that year too. 1777 can be a pretty decisive year. Now, this will be maybe the final part of the video. Maybe I'll go one more turn in the early spring of 77. But I'll put this one up, and thank you for watching.